back. Champions, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar interview, camera roll 354.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, we're going to talk a little bit about champions and championship play, level of championship play. I think the NBA is perhaps somewhat different from other leagues of professional competition in that from night to night you are continually playing against the best players in the world. I don't think anybody looks upon a trip to any part of the NBA as a vacation. Perhaps you can talk a little bit about the way that causes players to conduct themselves. It creates certain kinds of pressure, creates certain demands. Perhaps some fans are not aware of the fact that there is this night-to-night, city-to-city kind of championship-level pressure that's on every player. Perhaps you could discuss that for us.
It's kind of hard to discuss it clinically because I've dealt with it for so long. It's just the normal state of affairs for me. And because I'm still involved in the sport, I don't understand the contrast exactly the same way that you might, because you see it from a different perspective.
Do you think most fans in that regard see the game from a different perspective from the players? Is there a gap between the players' understanding of championship level NBA ball and what people who are coming to see the games every night perceive?
Most definitely, because what they see, everybody's good and everybody does their job well. They don't understand what it might take to be able to be prepared to do your job well at all times. And the players that have the ups and downs, if they have too many downs, they're not around too much longer.
Well, what kind of special preparations? I mean, on a day, speaking of yourself, for example, on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, the level of concentration that's required must bring certain things out of you.
I think the most demanding thing is the training. We get the fundamentals basically as we're children and through high school and college. And from that point on, you have to maintain and sharpen on little things, the total aspect of your game. But it's not, there's no one thing that you have to do that's so demanding. You have to have everything prepared and you have to keep it prepared. And that's really, you pay that cost in just having to go to practice all the time and not being able to do the things that you want to do. You can't party and you can't go visit your friends in Iowa or whatever it is, because you have to be traveling with the team, and that's a constant demand.
I think in that regard, many people would wonder then what the role of coaches or coaching staffs may be in regard to. I remember a coach years ago saying, being a coach in the NBA, what can you teach the players? How to comb their hair? What on a again, day-to-day or even season-to-season basis, does the role of the coach have to do in relationship to guys who are professionals, guys who have come to a certain level of play?
I think, excuse me, I think the coach has to coordinate talent. I mean, he has to be a very good talent coordinator. He has to understand personalities, and he has to put the right people together who can work together. You can get a lot of very talented people. If they can't work together very well, they're not as effective as a unit that might not be as talented but has a good team concept and can be a unified force most of the time. I think the teams that have the talent and the unity are the ones that win consistently.
A few years ago, I had a conversation with Henry Bibby, who was then playing with Philadelphia. He said that it was his view that the most demanding thing he confronted coming into the league was learning how to play defense, and that this was a consistent problem with players who came into the league who had perhaps outstanding offensive games who never really learned to play defense. So since you can't play zone in the NBA, you really have to learn, I would guess, a level of professional defense that may be even more demanding than any comparable form of the game at the college or amateur level.
I think the zone definitely has hampered a lot of players' defensive ability. It's a great tool to use in college, but it's totally absent in the pro game, and players who really haven't ever been tested defensively really have a tough time their first couple of years in the league. I can think of a couple of players that just really don't understand what it is to guard somebody, especially big men. They have to guard people real close to the hoop, and if they're guarding somebody that's very mobile and has a variety of shots, they usually end up looking like they're kind of lost out there.
I mentioned before the whole concept of championship play, most particularly in the NBA. There are no dynasties anymore in the NBA. Some people say they feel it's because there are more teams and the travel schedule. It would seem to me that the reason this is true is because the NBA draws into its ranks every year so many outstanding players, and that talent seems to be distributed around the league in a way that makes it virtually impossible for you to think of a team, again, like the Celtics winning 11 out of 13 years. What do you think?
Well, I think the most basic thing is that the league changes just a little bit each year. Every team changes. Just 2 or 3 different players on a single team can make that team go from mediocre to being a serious contender. And you never know who's going to pop up where, who's going to get hurt. Those are the variables that no one can predict. And I think that's what keeps it more or less a revolving door. You don't have the ability to really have one group of personnel establish domination and maintain it. It doesn't work that way.
When you say that the coaches have to be talent coordinators, I guess that means they have to really be able to select from the available pool of college players, not only good ball players, but people who are going to fit into a style, perhaps, that they've established already. Is that would you say, the bigger part of the coaching responsibility?
I think so. You have to have people that can work together. If you have certain talents and you need a certain additional talent and you get the wrong additional talent, then the whole picture doesn't work. So it's like a puzzle. You need to get these pieces here together and then this key piece, and then everything seems to fit together. And when that doesn't happen, things go off and you have a lot of disarray.
In the 14 or 15 years or so since you've been in the NBA, the continuing talk about the process of bringing college athletes into the professional ranks and what this does. We hear mostly about the abuses in recruiting and abuses in the use of players in terms of their educational programs. In your view, has it changed a great deal? Are you seeing players come into the league better prepared, let's say, for a total life in terms of education, in terms of their background in college, or perhaps less well prepared than you were when you were in college? Has that situation really changed very much? Is the drive for championship play, championships at the college level, tending to distort some of the things that are happening?
I think the college situation is very distorted. I think that whole question of amateur athletics is really become it's totally separated itself from its origins, and it's become something else. College athletics is not really amateur athletics. It's a big business, and the only people involved in it that aren't allowed to make any money are the athletes, and they become they're really exploited. You have a situation where you have universities making lots of money, the networks make lots of money, the coaches make money. The only people that don't make any money are the athletes, and most of the time they don't get their education. Most of the time they're not even pushed toward that end. They're just kept eligible as long as they are of some use to the university, and then when their eligibility is used up, they're gone. You had the case of a young man that went through a whole college program, and he had first or second grade literacy. This isn't uncommon. This is more common than even we found out about. And I think the athletes are really being exploited. A young man who would devote the time that he put into his sport and take that time and put it into academics could do a whole lot better for himself throughout his whole lifetime. I mean, immensely there's an immense difference in the benefits that you can get from having a good college education and using it in this society. The difference between that and being an athlete for 1 or 2 years, it's night and day. But it's very hard, I'd say darn near impossible, to impress young people with this.
You had to go through the same thing. You grew up in New York City. The pressures here for you as an athlete are certainly the equivalent, if not much greater than they were for a lot of other athletes. You went to school. You maintained grades. You played ball. What is the difference between somebody who can do that in a pressure situation in a university and someone who can't? Perhaps we're talking about what is needed to make the difference between the guy who does achieve and the guy who doesn't.
I was very fortunate. My father had a college education in music.
Just ran
355.
I think I was very fortunate in my background because my parents always had as a goal for me the fact that I should get a college education. My father has a college education. He went to Juilliard and got his degree in musicology. So that was always a goal for me, and I always had my eyes on it. Basketball became a possibility for me later, but my first goal was to go to college and get my education. So basketball just made it easier, but I never lost sight of the fact that that's what I wanted to do while I was at college. I got my degree. I graduated in 4 years, which is unusual in itself. It doesn't happen like that too much anymore.
Is there anything that can be done at the university level? I mean, obviously, kids have to be motivated in the pursuit of an education, but are there things that the universities are not doing now that, in your experience, could be done, perhaps to make it, to raise that average of number of athletes who do in fact get degrees?
I don't think that anything can be done at the university level, because by that time you have somebody that's already been totally through an educational system, and if they're not equipped, it's very hard for them to backtrack and make up all that lost ground. I think high school programs really have to be the ones that try to help students that have potential to be college athletes. They have to help them with their academics. They're going to need the math and the languages and the science that everyone else has to have in order to get into an academic institution. They're going to need that too. And that's not impressed on them in high school. I'm positive that a lot more students would understand the need for the academic background if it was impressed on them at an early enough time. But too many of them see the fact that so-and-so just signed his pro contract and is driving a big car and is dressed well and is very popular, and that seems to be the goal rather than academic goals and things that are a lot less sensational but a lot more stable.
You've been around champion athletes who are basketball players and probably in most other sports as well. Is there an identifiable, is there a commonality among people who have come from one place to another on the way of being a champion, or who've come from circumstances that perhaps did not speak of championship level or even aspiration, who have arrived at obviously a very special place in terms of the effort that has to go into it? Is there something that people could know about them that perhaps you'd say, hey, this is what you got to be? This is what these guys have done and been through. If you're young and you want to go there, this is the common thread that binds these guys together.
I think the most common thing that you'll find is the desire to win. I know I had it when I was a kid. I wanted to win all the foot races, and I wanted to get the most home runs when I played baseball, and I wanted to score a lot of points playing basketball. And I guess it's something that I concentrated on and manage to do well at. So I just think the desire to win is probably the internal thing, and then you have to have certain physical gifts.
Is the desire to win something you could teach a person?
I think you can aid someone in developing it, but if they don't have it, they're not ever going to have it. There are some people that just like to sit home and read books or go to the movies. They don't have a very intense competitive urge. Other people do. Some people that have the competitive urge aren't athletic, and they get into different other things. But there is a difference between people who compete very hardly and, who compete very intensely, and people who just kind of back off from that type of thing.
In ball, are you going to find the same thing? Are you going to find perhaps the difference on some teams is that people cannot compete intensely? I mean, this is another level of what you're talking about. But is it possible to think that on some ball clubs, the difference between champions and guys who come to the playoffs and reach one round or another every year, is the difference between guys having, perhaps in a final sense, that desire, that intense internal fire to win, and guys who maybe don't have it?
Well, I think at the professional level, everybody has the talent. Everybody has the talent. But some people can't deal with the hardship that you have to go through in order to go that extra couple of feet, to make that extra basket or whatever it is. Some people they give up sooner than others. And you can take two people of equal talent, and if the competitive edge in one of them is a lot less than the other, then you'll see a big disparity in their performance. People who have the same competitive edge and differing talent, then talent takes over. But I think that the competitive desire of an individual really sets them apart from ordinary people. It's a lot easier to see in horses. You can get a big, strong horse who's got speed, and if he doesn't want to run at the front of the pack, then he's always an also-ran and of no consequence. It's the one with the heart that usually brings home the purse. That's I think that's a very true fact in athletics.
When we spoke to Arthur Ashe, he described for us a place, he said tennis players call the zone, and it's a place where you play so far into the game, where you become so obsessed and concentrated with the moment-to-moment activity of the game, that he describes it as almost playing out of your mind. And he said the level of the game at that point is not only unimaginable to many athletes, it's almost completely divorced from people who are watching games. Have you experienced anything even similar to that?
Well, I know what he's talking about. When your concentration reaches a point where you are totally single-minded, and your whole being, your body and your mind and your total focus is involved in the moments of the competition, very talented people will demonstrate things that most people don't really understand. Another way to understand it would be, you can take a woman that weighs 120 pounds and she sees a piano fall on her child, and she can pick the piano up off her child. And you let her do it 1,000 more times, she can't even budge it off the ground. This is something that human beings are able to do. It's reaching into the depths of whatever it is and giving their most. And when you do that, you usually excel.
Those of us who watched the NBA championships this year between your team, the Lakers, and the Boston Celtics, I think felt at a number of points, I certainly did, I don't want to speak for myself, that you were playing the game at a level that, from a spectator point of view, was just phenomenal. And it occurred to me that you must be feeling something completely special, because most cynics would say, hey, he's going to get paid anyway. If they go home without the ring this time, they come back next year. But it seems to me that something does happen. Would I be safe in saying that during that series you were, perhaps after these many, many years in the NBA, achieving some very special personal levels of play?
It's flattering for people who want to compliment me on that, but that was a team effort. I was in a position of leadership. People count on me for leadership. But everybody gave their best, and if we didn't get that type of effort from everyone, we wouldn't have won. But without a doubt, the people that we count on to lead us, myself and Magic Johnson, we were ready. We were totally into the game and focused on it, and I think we kind of pulled everybody with us.
You know, when we watch the playoffs, particularly, one of the big factors is the number of injuries that have affected the playoffs, that affected the teams that have successfully negotiated the playoffs, and the level of championship play itself. Injuries seem so terribly common in a time when we know there have been tremendous advances in sports medicine, when we know that players themselves are a lot more aware of the care of their bodies. Does it seem to you over this period of time that you've been playing that injuries are more common than they once were, or more serious perhaps than they once were? What about the rate of injuries and the way it affects, again, championship play?
I don't think the rate of injuries has increased that much. It's just that a crucial injury can knock a team right out of it.
Good.
354.
I don't think the rate of injuries has really increased at all. It's just that when you have an unfortunate incident, it really affects a team's ability to compete. Sometimes one player can really make a big difference.
I asked that question in relationship to a question is raised by a number of observers of the game. They said that the schedule and the traveling, and particularly at a point in the season, players may be especially fatigued, and that the injury becomes a very significant part of the drive toward the playoff schedule.
I don't know if it causes injuries, but it definitely decreases the quality of play. You got guys playing 4 games a week for like two or 3 months in a row, and after a while you just don't have your best to give. They're going to have to do something about that if they want the quality of the game to improve, but they don't have to do that. I think the owners of the teams just really don't care. They care, but not enough to change anything. They're very comfortable with things the way they are, and they don't care really if the game suffers because of the travel schedule.
Does that carry over into the general relationship between the management and players? After all, we're talking about an industry, really, so we're talking about management and the proletariat in a sense. Is there, in your view, a better relationship in that regard than existed when you came into the league?
I think it's better, but I don't think that management is totally committed to improving the game as much as they can. The season is too long, and we play until, I think we stop playing about a week before Wimbledon starts. That's ridiculous. Basketball used to be a winter sport. It used to be something you did indoors after the football season ended, and now they drag it out too far. I think they have a very good thing in the playoffs. There's a lot of fan interest in that. It's very well attended. It gets a lot of publicity. It's starting to become international. People are starting to recognize the NBA playoffs as a major sporting event. And I think that they just really detract from that by dragging the season out so long. You have a situation where you have 23 teams in the league. 16 of them are going to make the playoffs regardless of what happens. And they're going to play 82 games to decide who makes the playoffs. That's just a little bit too much. they could cut it down and pare the season down to where it made sense and to where they could have the playoff begin at a great time, right in between seasons, right between the time that baseball gets hot and football is cooled off. I think it's the perfect time for the NBA playoffs to take place. We have the whole arena to ourselves almost. But you know, they don't see it like that. They don't see any need to change, and I guess we're just stuck with this.
Recently, Lou Conaseca, the coach of St. John's team, said that he saw time perhaps in the next 5 to 10 years when basketball would be a truly world professional sport. Do you see that coming?
I see it coming, definitely. They're starting to be talented players from around the world now. I believe there's someone from Spain that's going to try out for an NBA team this year. There's been a Yugoslav that's tried out already. So the talented people that are needed to play the game are starting to pop up in some faraway places, and there's a lot of interest. I believe the playoff finals this year were televised in Italy live, which is totally, I didn't understand that at all. And next thing I knew, I was being interviewed by an Italian TV crew. And I believe they showed 1 or 2 of the games in England and in Paris. A friend of mine that lives in Paris saw one of the games in Paris. And people seem to really enjoy the game. It's a good game for television. It's not very complicated, and you can see the ball and you can see what's happening, and you get a chance to appreciate the athletic skills. So I think that is the future of the game.
NBA basketball, of course, has been dominated by black players for a number of years, and arguments, certainly here in the New York papers, have tilted back and forth on the reason why that is true. I've listened, for example, to Harry Edwards say there are more black ball players in the NBA because they work harder to get there and stay there. There are people who offer an argument I find kind of silly. They say, well, blacks are particularly physically suited for this kind of game. Somewhere perhaps between those two extremities there is some reasonable discourse about why 75 to 80% of the players in the NBA consistently now for years have been black.
I have my own theories. They might not make me very popular, but I have my own theories. First of all, athletics as a means of changing our economic background is really one of the few things that black people have in front of them where they have examples of people who have been successful. And you tend to follow the light, so to speak. Someone else was successful doing such and such, well, I'm going to try it. So there's that incentive. I think there's just our own subculture. The whole idea of being able to go out on the basketball court and express yourself as an individual seems to appeal to the black population. It's appealed to a lot of whites too, but that seems to be something that's part of our subculture. I think physically, you can't discount the fact that blacks in this country were bred to be physical specimens. The strongest men, the strongest black men that were around were encouraged to reproduce in the slavery system. I think that has built up a collection in our gene pool of physical specimens. Now, I might be totally wrong. I think somebody should check that out. And I think there's also a factor that blacks have absorbed the dominant traits from 2 entirely divergent gene pools. And you see blacks from America and the Caribbean doing very well in certain sports. And I think that definitely helps their genetic, their genetic background definitely helps with that. Somebody that is strongly Japanese genetically is not going to do well in basketball because they're not going to have the right height. Yet on the other hand, they might be perfect for gymnastics. This is a genetic factor that definitely affects physical capabilities. I think it's there. I don't know to what degree, and I'm not saying that we got the right genes to play basketball at all, but there does seem to be something to that. because I've noticed that the black guys from Africa don't do well in the sprints, and they don't do too well in the 400. And I was just trying to figure that out. That's why I started just observing that. I could be completely wrong, but I think there's something to that.
In regard to Africa, we got one African at Houston, a large one. Do you see a time when, because there are tribes of Africans who produce very tall people, do you see a time when there'll be a substantial number of Africans perhaps coming into the sport, or is that?
I don't think that's far-fetched. 10 years ago, if you said there'd be a whole lot of German kids playing basketball, somebody'd look at you. It's like in the pros, there's 2 or 3 now, and there's several in college. Germans seem to have the genetic background that gives them the size that enables them to excel in basketball. Some Germans. And because of that, the ones that do have the incentive to compete athletically, they'll probably produce more basketball players.
In the same regard, having this model in front of a lot of black youngsters across the United States, having on television and having in their local arena these stars performing, has convinced some people that there is perhaps too much emphasis being placed on it. This is something that Arthur and I talked about in the interview, that perhaps there is too much emphasis on athletics in the black community, and we're losing a sense of balance for a lot of these kids who may just put all their eggs in that one basket and come up short, so to speak. Do you think there's an overemphasis as you move around the country? Do you think that people perhaps are pushing black kids too often into the direction of athletics, perhaps neglecting some other areas of development?
I totally agree with Arthur. I worked with him on his project for the academic incentive thing that he was trying to do in schools around the country. And I agree with him on that completely. There's too much emphasis placed there, and then it's reinforced by everything you see in the media and read in the sports pages. An athlete like Edwin Moses doesn't get much notice, yet he's darn near PhD. I think he's got his master's in physics and going on his PhD. He's a very brilliant man. And kids don't understand that. They just know that he runs the hurdles real well. And they don't get the opportunity to appreciate that.
Come back to that point. We have
Okay.
one more? Okay,
Yeah,
so we've got one more row.
357.
I think black athletes who are capable scholars don't really get the publicity that they should get in the black community. Obviously, the community at large is not really that interested. They have scholars and bright people, but in our community, that does not always take place. Our scholars and great minds don't get the publicity that they should get in order to give the children an incentive to follow in their footsteps. Someone can really overnight make millions of dollars by signing an athletic contract, whereas if you're going to develop a new computer chip or work out a mathematical sequence that is considered a breakthrough, nobody's going to know about it, and that's a big problem because the kids only see the easy way. They don't see the sure way. You can use your mind your whole life. You can't use your body in all cases competitively past your 35th or 40th birthday. So there's a big difference there that children need to understand and be guided in, and unfortunately they don't get that guidance until it's too late.
I had a conversation a few years ago with George McGinnis when he was also still playing with Philadelphia. And I asked him, as part of the interview, I asked him if he knew guys in the NBA who had sons that he thought would grow up to be ball players. And he reflected for a moment. He said, I really don't think so. He said, one, I don't think they're going to have the hunger for this that we've had. And I'm wondering if part of his answer means that the sons and daughters of the group of men you've come through athletics with may in fact be ready to produce a very special group of scholars, because opportunities for education, for example, opportunities for travel, opportunities for certain kinds of spiritual development will be there that perhaps haven't been available in the previous generation of black people, so that the doctors, the lawyers, the engineers that I think Arthur has spoken about have come along, he expects to come along, maybe coming out of this gene pool, maybe daughters of champions and sons of champions, and produce that new race of people. What do you think?
Well, I certainly am doing my part. I have 4 children, and I encourage them academically all the time, and I don't put any pressure on them athletically. They can pursue whatever they want to pursue. I always get on them to maintain their academics, because that's the most important thing, and I think that they understand that. Now, I tell them, and they understand that it doesn't hurt to want to be involved in competitive sports. I think it's a great thing for them, especially as far as their physical maintenance. I think that's something that they should do, but it has a place, and it has it shouldn't have 100% of our attention. It should only have a certain percentage of our attention, and once the young people understand that, I think that they can definitely make more strides as far as becoming a well-rounded human being.
Let's talk a little bit now about your championship career, and if we can sort of tell a story backwards. You were, of course, always taller than most of the kids your age as you were growing up, and I guess people sort of pulled you literally by the arm into basketball and said, hey, you just can't be that big and not play ball. Was there a point at which you said to yourself, regardless of the expectations of other people, or the desire for other people to make me into something, I want to be a champion, I want to be something special in this game? Did that happen to you anywhere? Were you consciously aware of it occurring to you at some point?
Well, nobody made me play basketball. There are a lot of things that I did. I did everything, actually. My grade school had a couple of sports teams. I played on everything that they had. I ran track in the spring. I played Little League baseball, and then in the fall I play sandlot football and I play basketball, and it was just a year-round thing for me. I just loved athletics, and my family just let me get involved. They always emphasized, though, that I should try to make the honor roll, and I made the honor roll consistently when I was in grade school. I only made it once in high school. But by the time I got to high school, basketball had become a career for me. I knew it was going to pay the bills, etc. So I started to pursue that.
Did you think of it in those terms? Did you think, well, hey, this is a career line for me? I can really start thinking now in high school of building a life for myself around this game. I'm trying really to find the center of something else. I think there is also somewhere in all of that and all of the practical assumption, maybe the somewhat loftier assumption again about championships and being there at a point, even for a moment, just to be able to say, hey, this is the best there is. This is as high as you can go.
I remember watching Loyola of Chicago win the NC2A, and I said, I want to do that. I got a good chance to do that. And if I go to the right college, I can do that. But already at that point, I think I was a freshman in high school. I knew I was going to go to college because I was going to get a basketball scholarship. I knew that already. And that was a goal. And I said, geez, I don't have to pay anything to go to college. That's great. And that's all it was. And of course, as my high school career unfolded and I made All-America, I knew that it would probably involve the pros. But originally, it was just a way to get my tuition paid for college.
I wonder if you talk about the biggest incentive for you going to UCLA. Young kid, you're going to go 3,000 miles away from home. Totally different environment, I think, from what you grew up in. What really was the clincher in going out there?
I think I wanted to get that far away so I could be on my own. I was tired of parental supervision, and I thought I was a man, and I was ready to make a man's decisions. So let me get away from my folks so that they can't be watching me all the time. And that's probably why I went so far.
Talk to us about your relationship with John Wooden when you were at UCLA. We've listened to a lot of people talk about the influence of his basketball mind on their development. What precisely does that mean?
Well, he has the game broken down into very simple and fundamental little modules, so to speak, and he believes in total preparation, and he believes that if you prepare yourself for what you have to face, that you can overcome all the odds if you want to win. And that's what he taught everybody. He said, if you apply that to your life, you'll also be a winner in the things that you try to accomplish with your life. It's the same situation, and he was right. Of course, that's a little bit too subtle for most college students who are more interested in girls and success and you name it. But my relationship with him was very educational, and I learned a lot from him as far as what winning was about and how to win. There are a lot of different ways to win, and he has always been a class individual. A whole lot of successful people don't have class. They're very successful, but they have very little class. And he, to me, is the epitome of somebody that, whether in victory or defeat, he was very gracious and always showed a lot of class. I have a lot of respect for him in that respect.
In 1968, you made a very significant, very important decision, and that was to support the boycott at the Olympics. A decision some people criticized you for. It was a decision that I think you made yourself and were willing to take whatever flack or consequence came out of it. Looking back now, it'll be 20 years soon. How do you reflect on that decision?
I'm still very proud of my involvement in that. There was no boycott, as you know, but I did support the concept of a boycott because the Olympics is most definitely a political, semi-political event. If it were not political, they wouldn't have any national flags up, and they would just let the athletes of the world compete. But that's impossible. Politics is one of the facts of life in the 20th century, and the Olympics is most definitely a political event. I'm very proud of Tommy Smith and John Carlos and those guys for taking the stand that they did. They suffered for it. They paid for it, and I think black people benefited from it. I think it was the type of thing that people around the world respected because we were not firebrands. We were not talking about burning anything down or any type of destruction, but we did call attention to the inconsistencies of life here in America, and I think that got us a lot of respect. That was probably the height of my political activity, but I'm happy I did it, and I have no regrets about it.
Could we cut for a moment?
So, ready?
3:58.
I talked a few years ago with Ornette Coleman. He said that one of the things he found about basketball, similar to his own art, was that it gave the soloist an opportunity to function and to flourish, actually, within the ensemble concept. Is there any, I know you pursue the music art, do you ever feel that relationship? Is there anything to that?
Absolutely. I think that you can definitely express yourself as an individual when you play basketball, and the fact that it's a team sport means that you do have to work with other people, but every individual has something unique to give to the game, and we see that all the time.
Is it a rhythm game? I've heard Armand Hill, who was playing there for the Hawks, that he felt that guards in the NBA were like the drummers in a band, that they sort of established and really maintained the tempo. Is there any truth in that?
I think so. I think that teams, when they're going well, they have their own pace and their own tempo, and they have their own special kind of flourish that only that group can make happen on the court. I think that's one of the wonderful things about the game, to see certain individuals come together and what they can do as a unit.
You played, of course, with Oscar Robertson at Milwaukee, and one of the premier guards in the league in just this regard, in establishing, maintaining a tempo for a game. I wonder if you talk a little bit about that experience. You did win a championship with that team, and I wonder if there were some moments in that season. I know you've talked about them in a couple of articles as being special. I wonder if you describe some of that experience for us now.
Well, that was long ago and far away, kind of, and it's hard to remember everything, except one of the things that does stick out is the fact that the ease in which we did it. We won 4 straight from the Bullets, and it's very rare that happens in championship play. I was very proud of that.
With your current team, 3 championships, if I can recall correctly. Seasons of championship play, because I think in being a champion, you're not just talking about the years you win the ring. It's the competition, it's the level and the style of the game that you're playing year after year. Maybe you would talk about any things that particularly stand out for you in these seasons that you've spent in Los Angeles, and perhaps even more to the point with this current crop of players you're with now.
I think my own personal development really is the thing that has happened in my life that I'm most pleased with. It's helped me in my public image and I guess the way people perceive me. But it doesn't have that much to do with basketball, although people do see differences in my game. I just think that learning how to deal with who I am and accepting myself and allowing myself to be known by the public has really helped me a lot. And I think that's what I'm most pleased about in these past couple of years.
In these years, have you seen yourself changing, or have you seen the public change in regard to you? Have you had to work to develop certain things in yourself that you thought perhaps were there, needed to be brought out, particularly by you, not because of the influence of others, or because of the influence of you being a public figure?
I think the fact that I've matured and have learned how to deal with the public. I didn't deal with them very well. I didn't have any real strong will to deal with the public daily. It just was a hassle. I'm a lot more patient and understanding now, and I think people see that and they like me a lot more, and kind of snowballs.
In the work that you do, is there something you would say to people who are going to be looking at you this season or looking at this game? Is there something perhaps that you feel the public doesn't pay enough attention to in the sphere in which you operate? Are there things that perhaps you read about in the papers or senses that you get from people's reaction that perhaps there's something in your game, in ball, that ought to be understood a little bit better perhaps by the press, perhaps by people who watch the game?
I don't know. I think the game is pretty well exposed. I think that as the public becomes a little bit more sophisticated in the nuances of the game, that they'll appreciate it more. But for the most part, people understand basketball because it's an American game, and just about everyone in this country, whether they're male or female, old or young, at one point in their life has thrown the ball at the hoop just one time. If it was only in PE class when you were in the 11th grade, you've done it once. And everybody seems to be able to relate like that.
One more question in that area. Is there a regional difference in this understanding? Do people in different parts of the United States understand the game better? Are there areas, for example, where people are already perhaps a little bit more sophisticated about basketball?
I think in the inner cities, especially here on the East, basketball is like very deeply ingrained into the lifestyle of everybody. Just the whole thing of there not being a lot of room, and a basketball court can be set up just about anywhere. A half court can be set up against any wall just about, and you know, the kids in the inner city, they go at it. Out in Indiana, where John Wooden is from, there's a totally different ambiance, but it's the same game, and I think that's one of the great things about the game. it flourishes in different environments among different ethnic groups, and it makes for a very exciting and diverse type of game.
You said a moment ago, and I thought you said very well, that you felt that these past few years had contributed enormously to your personal development, and that was something that you remember about this time. Is there anything in the game itself? Is there a moment or a time or period in the game as you participated in that particularly stands out in your mind that you'd want to remember 10, 15, 20 years from now, that you'd want other people to remember?
Well, I think this past season, when we overcame the great bugaboo that the Lakers had established against the Celtics, losing all the time, and we managed to turn that around. I think that kind of transcended even sports. It's just like the team that you always knew could win finally came through in the toughest of circumstances. And people really appreciated that and got behind that. And it was on a level that, really went beyond just normal basketball fans. People who aren't basketball fans saw it and were really entertained, and they got some of the joy out of it. And I think that's what has made this season probably my most rewarding in my pro career.
How would you finish the sentence for us? Began with words, and I'd appreciate if you would say the words, to be a champion.
To be a champion means to give your best and to strive for the top.
Cut.